So, we've learned about different accommodations and things, and now I wanted to kind of focus a little bit on the kind of what the potential employers, might want to know. And so, as Frank pointed out, it's kind of very, rather than taking, like the whole dream list of the candidate, it's almost, like splintering down different job tasks and functions, which I guess is a much different way for an employer to think about. But when you're talking about JJ and he's working 2 hours a day and he's doing boxes and things like that, that's kind of okay, right? That I can't imagine it hurting your business, but I guess one of the things that I would think is that as an employer, thank you, Rebecca, is
you're an angel, Rebecca.
As you come up with these job tasks, let's pretend you've got 5 or 6 different job tasks, and now you've got 5 or 6 different people doing them, is rather than one person. How does that impact your business or your planning or your time? And, what are the concerns and considerations with that?
Yeah, actually, I don't see really any disadvantages really from an employer standpoint. If there were any, the advantages truly outweigh them. There's actually an increase in productivity, believe it or not, because we have some skill sets that are, higher skill sets where you're engaging customers. And in our business, we have to know everything related to the shipping world and with all the carriers. And that's a lot of information that employees need to know. And although they have it at their fingertips in front of a computer, you need to be able to articulate that with a customer. So when you take that employee away from that environment and put them in a environment where they're just having to package something, okay, that needs to be done. That's work that needs to be done. Okay. But it would sometimes overwhelm the individuals in the front. So I'll call it, the front end operations and the back end operations. So the front end operations, that's where everything happens and decisions are being made between the customer and the employee. But you take them away from that and the front end suffers. Okay, so the more you can keep that individual up in the front, engaged and making the process seamless for the customer, the better it is for business. And when we talk about putting niches in, and I mentioned this before, I said, you know what, I'll take 4 or 5 more JJs here, because it does improve productivity, and that ultimately, from a business standpoint, is what affects your bottom line. And so that's a win-win, hands down.
And speaking of that, on the tables in front of you is a flyer buried under all the canned stuff. Shameless self-promotion, sorry. And on there, it talks about employing people with autism and the benefits to your business. We can share a PDF with the people on Facebook. Cindy has the file. So I found that very interesting. One thing I want to talk to Greg about is, we've talked about the people with autism responding to and liking job functions and tasks that are repetitive in nature.
Oh, yes.
And so one of the things that I think about, and I guess job coaches, whether Lara and our folks at SOS Cares, is the concern for underemployment. How do we address that? Because maybe even somebody who seems nonverbal, I've heard stories about them, stocking shelves or whatever, where in actuality they're somebody who's wicked smart like you and can be doing all these other, like how do you suggest that we overcome that concern?
Well, that seems to me that's more of like a 2-part question.
Okay.
So first off, what I seem to think is that with like the job functions, usually people on the autism spectrum love positions where there's extreme focus. As then, and this is one other thing that I've struggled with too, is that usually like someone like me did not really get a lot of this idea of chatting with other colleagues in the office. Our mind is like, we have a job to do, we must get it done, and we must get it done right now. And then in a lot of cases, some people like, what's wrong with, whoever? He doesn't like to talk to, and he seems to be like, all work. And it's like, we have like that extreme focus. So it's like, and like an example, like for someone like who's not on the spectrum, when they would see like this like group of people, they would just think like some random facts. But then for someone like me, they'd be like, okay, there's 25 people and so many desks and some of things like that. So we would have that kind of focus. And then also for the second part of there about with the underemployment, what I have found out, and then we have been able to find it work in Massachusetts as part of my work on the Autism Commission, is that to be able to help with the underemployment is that in a lot of cases, people on the spectrum can work more, but they just need to have some more accommodations. So
When you say work more, you mean like work longer?
yeah,
Like, so JJ works 2 hours a day, but like if he, we know that Frank would give him the accommodation if he needed to take a 30-minute break to work longer. And so that's kind of what you found out with underemployment, but it's in my mind, that still doesn't address, I guess it really comes down, Miss Lara, maybe you can chime in on the assessment of the individual and kind of like what they can sustain. You're on mute.
So I think it kind of goes back all to that question that you asked about how, I mean, a little bit related to the question about how you asked how, customized employment or the breakdown of the jobs might affect an employer. And we've actually seen the same with Hospitality America and hotels. We've been able to place somebody who can assist the housekeeper in completing their jobs faster, because we've been able to train somebody to, for example, strip beds. So that, employee goes in, strips off the beds and supports the housekeeper's work. The idea there would be that we build on that repetitive task, and as the up participant continues in their job and starts to build out those job functions, that we can add repetitive tasks, and that we really do have the support of that job liaison to work with that employee in the early stages of that. The other thing that we are trying to implement with the Up Employment Initiative is a professional cohort of the participants with some other employees from Hospitality America, so that it is an inclusive cohort, and to kind of identify where we can build those jobs. We want to prevent that bottlenecking. We want to prevent somebody from being stuck in that one position, stripping beds long term. So I think really supporting that individual in individualized employment and then helping them progress. Also, it's on the responsibility to some extent of the employer, and we're fortunate to have an employer who's really willing to work with us in that way. But I think talking to employers about that and letting them know that we're not looking for, jobs that are being created for somebody. We're looking at ways that we can help enhance and increase productivity to a certain degree.
Gotcha. So
I don't know if that answers the question very well.
Could you do just for the audience, could you define cohort?
So for us, it would be the cohort or the class of this first pilot program year, and it would be facilitated by job liaisons. So the collection of employees that are working at the 4 different hotel sites, participants of the Employment Initiative, and then a peer from their hotel who does not have autism
Gotcha.
or who does not have a disability.
Go ahead, please.
And then also to add further depth to what Laura was saying, and there was another type of autism cohort program that has now been taking off in the last few years. It's being used at companies like EY, PwC, Ford, Freddie Mac, and GMW, and even I think it's either Brooks or Walgreens in South Carolina, where a nonprofit that does have like just the particular training can then be able to put together an autism hiring initiative where they do away with the traditional interview, and then carefully selected candidates that fit what the company is looking for, they can then be able to come to whatever company it is and then to show them what they can be able to do so that the company knows that they have the technical skills to be able to perform the job. And at the same time, they get a lot of the nonverbal communication coaching, and then also how to better work in a team, and then how to better be able to perform with the group as well. So I am glad to see that there is other cohort type programs that are coming out there, as that is a big solution to this problem.
So, one thing that we haven't shared, Greg, we talked about, your education and kind of your employment is, why don't you share quickly with everybody what it is that you are doing in Massachusetts as an autism employment advocate?
Okay. Is first off, back in 2016, after I began my advocacy, for lack of a better words, by accident, when I got invited to a sectional event with the Order of the Euro, and then in a polite way, I was saying like the national policies were wrong. And then I had mentioned ways how we can make them even better. And then they said, okay, you have a lot of courage. We like that. So then I helped them with that. And then I ran into a woman named Diane Lashinskis, who was on the Mass Autism Commission. And then she had heard me speaking about several of these things. And then she's like, hey, we could use you on the commission, but you need to get the governor's approval. So I spoke to several of my legislator friends on both sides of the aisle, and then they convinced the governor to appoint me there. And so what I've been able to do since getting appointed there about 5.5 years ago, I had helped to get 5 bills passed to help to be able to improve access to the ultra critical early interventions, and also to improve healthcare and to be able to help to better protect people on the autism spectrum from predators. And also very recently, I had helped to be able to pass a disability employment tax credit, because there is the loophole like in the federal law, then it's like a lot of that it says you would need to provide reasonable accommodations. And in some cases, some companies would be a bit hesitant, but then with this tax credit, and I know South Carolina is doing the same thing, they can then be able to provide what in an overwhelming majority of cases, like the funding that would be needed to have these accommodations. And so with that, we were able to get a lot more success with the collaborations with state agencies and then into employment.
Thank you. So one thing that I don't know if, people who don't have a connection with autism is, especially with higher functioning, or I guess anybody, a lot of, I guess what precipitates a meltdown is anxiety, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so we know the people with autism, the extreme focus you talked about also comes across as rigidity, right? Very rigid in what you're doing. And what I've found or heard is that some people with autism will try something once, and if they don't do it well the first time, or after a couple of times, they get really frustrated and they kind of just shut down and they do not want to proceed with that. How do you overcome that as a person with autism? And then I wanted to ask kind of Frank and Lara, how do you handle that rigidity and wanting to have that person try something again, to kind of like stretch goals or things like that? How do you handle that?
Well, since to me that all sounds like a two-parted question to
Again,
me.
sorry. Yes.
Because this is it's just my very focused nature. Well, it's like, first off, in a lot of cases, we're more prone to meltdowns if there is like particular types of changes, especially if it's like something out of the blue. So it's like if we were like, so if like I was told like, okay, we need you to analyze several of these budget spreadsheets and get like the cost benefit analysis. And all of a sudden they'd be like, okay, we need you to do something completely different. I'm like, what's going on here? And in some cases, I just get really filled with anxiety. And then it just really seems like really squeeze my mind. But then what I have been able to work with Empower, because it does happen every so often, but then to be able to get more of the time to be able to better space it out, so then the chances of a meltdown are greatly reduced. So then what I've been working with my manager, God bless her, is that she would be like, okay, we need you to get X assignment done by a certain period of time. Then we have another one we'd like to give you, and then you'd usually wait like a couple hours, so that time my mind can then get the mental focus of that. And then also to overcome it, what I have found to be very effective is to be able to just like if I'm starting to have like the stimming or the beginning signs of a meltdown, I'll just go, okay, I'm stepping back. And in some cases, I'll just do like some really deep breathing, or then I try to go to like the equivalent of like a quiet room for a few minutes, and then to be able to really pull back and then let it slide. That is very important.
What does a meltdown look like for you?
Okay.
So you're at work and you're overwhelmed and you have a meltdown. What does that, what could your coworker, what would that look like?
Well, first off, it would start with me using like excessively using my hands or like excessively using my feet. And then I'd have like a really big like squeezing sensation, like be the equivalent of like with Stephanie's mug right there. If like someone to like take their hand and start to squeeze it, and I'd kind of have like that kind of a sensation throughout my system. And then I'm like, do something before it gets out of control. So, sorry, Steph.
So Frank, as an employer, you know, like when you're working with JJ or someone and, you know, they are not successful at the task or he isn't, like, how stretch goals, how do you keep the anxiety level down and kind of deal with that?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good discussion and insight, because when you're working with someone, you're wanting to know what those trigger points are. And I just happen to have was fortunate enough to have SOS Cares who actually, you know, brought JJ here, even though I knew his mom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and but you know, one of the questions I asked is, you know, what are his trigger points, you know, so that we can avoid them if at all possible. And you know, I explained to her, you know, how it can get here at the center with the amount of foot traffic, the amount of noise, and you know, and explaining that to her, she says, "Oh, well, he should be okay with that because it's not Walmart, what we call Walmart noise." Okay, so you have all these inputs occurring, you know, at a higher scale, and so I said, "Well, that's good," and you know, so understanding that was real critical. But he also has his escape room out in the back. I call it the escape room, and sometimes when I look over and I don't see him, and I know how it is up front, I know that he may feel a little bit overwhelmed, and I know where to look for him. He's in his escape room, and he just goes back to the break room, and when things kind of calm down, I come looking for him. And it's like, "How you doing, JJ? Everything good?" He says, "Yep."
All
Okay,
right.
and then you know, he comes back out to the floor. But yeah, understanding those trigger points is really, really important.
Thank you. Lara, how do you, you know, can you respond to the question? Do you even remember what it was?
I started writing them.
Good. because I don't remember.
What's that?
No, go ahead, sorry.
So, and I don't mean this in terms of we're the experts, but I think educating employers, and we are at a time when more employers, more businesses are responding to this and being receptive. So we kind of look at it and strike all the irons hot. Let's find employers that are sitting in on these panels, that are sharing their success stories, that are also sharing their trials and tribulations and what hasn't worked. So educating employers, hearing from employers, and involving the colleagues who aren't autistic or who don't have a disability, to support that inclusive environment. We also we believe that the job liaison position is really key to the success and sustainability of this. And I think what I look at it in terms of in stages, that might not always be a necessary component, but we're changing we're changing the cultures. We're kind of trying to shift the paradigm and create some system level change. So there needs to be some support. So that is key for us. I think support to the employees. And like what Frank was talking about, empowering employers to talk to your employee that has autism, ask them what they need, ask them what a meltdown looks like, just like we're doing here. And empowering the employer empowers them, the employee, and doesn't create this stigma around that, or create a situation where somebody can't work because of that. Because I think, many of us need a variety of accommodations, or we have a variety of things that help us be more successful or more productive. And so I think just showing that interest and showing that willingness to recognize that and support is, I think, really important.
So you go ahead, please.
Okay, and to add further to Lauren and his comments here, is I found out that there is a couple avenues that have been proven effective, not just when I was at Mass Mutual, but also now at Empower, is to definitely have somebody that someone like me can turn to is very important. And then at Mass Mutual, we had like the equivalent of like a business resource group called ADAPT, where it'd be a lot of like the disability advocates within the company. And then I would usually be able to speak to one or two of them, usually like once a week or something for like half an hour. And then it'd be like, "Hi, Greg, how's everything going?" And, and so forth. And then sometimes they would like hang out to get like a quick cup of tea or something. And then I was able to then have these people to reach out to. And then also now that I'm at Empower, they have like the same kind of group. And then I've been able to reach out to many of them to be able to have that as well. So also what I feel that is also working as well is if we do have like somebody that the person with autism can be able to reach out to with like some of like the training and such, that is a game changer.
Do you need a break?
No. And
Okay.
then for the second point that Laura was mentioning is that in many cases in some of the other industries, like this pandemic has then also showed that a lot of the jobs can be done fully remote. Because like in many cases, and then many of my friends who are on the spectrum have told me the same thing, is that they just could not handle a lot of the quick changes, all the lights and the doors and the things that just jump out of nowhere in an office environment. But then a lot of the companies were having the opportunity to be able to fully work remote. So they could be like in their house, apartment, or wherever. And then they could then be able to do many of these jobs if they're given that kind of an accommodation.
So to that point, I'm interested in knowing, So a lot of these tasks that people with autism are given as employees, they are considered, I guess then at some point they become like self-starters, right?
Actually, I meant to tell you, I didn't finish you had a second question, and that was the stretch goals,
Okay,
but it builds on exactly that. And that's, you know, in the work environment, you have your goals that you give employees. Usually that's given on a yearly basis during a review, right? So you're measuring them over the progress of the year, throughout the year. And when you're introducing someone on the spectrum, you're building on that from day one. Okay, so you have the tasks that you want that individual to complete, and the goals are built as they progress. And you know, from, I mentioned JJ specifically packaging. Well, guess what? You know, he is doing our inventory. Okay, and I talked about productivity. Just to inventory the boxes that we have at our center, it takes any of the front end employees about an hour and a half to do that. Okay, it takes JJ 30 minutes, and it's correct. Okay, so he knows that that's done every so often. He knows, you know, that the work that comes in packaging, that's constantly coming in, but he has that list that he knows, hey, I got to do these other things, and he accomplishes it. But it gets to the point where he's actually on autopilot, and that's really what
he is on site. When I wanted to ask you, because one of the issues that you run across with autism is initiation, right? Getting started, and maybe in my experience with my son, it's more when he's overwhelmed and he doesn't know where to start, even though he kind of knows what's going on. And like working remotely, like how do you, as you know, an organization or a potential employer, you know, like really, if you know about autism and initiation might be an issue, like how do you motivate or get people to start something, or especially if they're working at home? You know, do you have any input on that?
No,
Insight?
I have a lot of input on that.
Right. Sorry, I ask the dumbest questions sometimes.
Hey, in this kind of conference, the only stupid questions are ones not asked.
Not asked, okay.
Is to see, like, first off, with someone like on the spectrum, we would struggle a lot initially, because especially if it's like it's a new job. So I'm like, okay, what do we do? Who's that? And what's all this fun? So then usually at the beginning, you just need to be able to like gradually build it in. And then so be like, okay, if we need to build like a boxes, okay, like show them visually. Visual learning is one of the most common methods of people on the spectrum to being able to learn. Because in many cases, if you just talk to them, it's like, you might as well try to like speak to them from like Paris or like Rome or something. So it's not going to work. But then like if you show them visually how to do it, we can be able to better digest it and learn it much faster. And then once it gets in there, and sometimes it might take a little bit more than normal, a lot of times it just becomes automatic. And then for like someone on the spectrum, as we get like the list of tasks you need to do, and then it'd be like, okay, and usually I clock in like at 6:30 in the morning, and they'd be like, okay, I need to check to see if I need to update this spreadsheet, or if I need to do this. And then usually I have like a long checklist of things that I need to be able to do. And then in many cases, when on the spectrum, if like they're in a particular group, they'd be like, okay, is there anything in this group I can do? Okay, I don't see anything. Then we have tendencies to want to try to reach out to other groups if there's like something similar and be able to help them out with as well.
So one of the things that you had talked about, visual learning, I was at a conference in Temple, Grandin was there and said, if it has a process, it must be written down.
Oh yeah.
So I found that helpful, even like at my house, you know, we're trying to treat my son as a roommate rather than giving him chores, you know, so, you know, we've got the directions over the washer and the dryer, and, you know, we try and approach everything as like those soft life skills and doing that. What were you going to say?
As I have actually had the honor of meeting Temple Grandin twice, and I had a chance to speak to her for about 30 minutes.
Wow.
When she gave to speak at the Unitarian churches, either in New Bedford or Fall River. So yeah, she was definitely very right on that one. Because then if there's these specific tasks, if they're not like written down, or if it was like something different, you might as well just throw everything out the window. And I know it might seem a bit blunt and a bit over the top, but it's the truth. And then it's like the trick is to have as much structure as possible. And if I may.
Yes, please.
And then also to back up one other comment that he had made, and my apologies for not mentioning it earlier. It's when he was mentioning like when we have like a review, and what I have found out to be effective is to not push it forward to like a year, but then to check in with the person on the spectrum like every couple of months. So that way, if there's some other particular kind of issue, you can be able to better react to it sooner. Because in many cases, and I'll use myself as an example, if someone does not say something earlier, then I immediately assume, okay, everything's fine, everything's good. So then it's good to check up with every couple months, and then be very specific. So it's like, okay, this is not going quite good. And they're like, oh, okay. And then be able to have the goal to work on it and to be able to improve.
So it's a SMART goal, right? It has to be
definitely.
measurable and
Oh, yeah.
attainable, realistic. and
Smart,
timely. So-
measurable, attainable, realistic. And
Yeah,
timely.
yeah.
They pound that acronym in our heads constantly.
So one of the things I wanted to stress is that, with the need for human resources, right now, nobody's high, I know that everybody, not everybody, but, like, wow, here's a great labor pool. And, there's definitely people that want to work. But it's not a quick fix, right? Because, Frank can attest, and everybody here, that it's kind of baby steps in a way. Like I had a couple restaurateurs contact me last year, when we were going to get hit with the silly season, and they wanted to hire people with autism. But, you can do that, but there has to be an understanding that, it's going to be, short stints, and it's going to be a learning process. And JJ's been working with you for how long?
Maybe a couple months
Couple
now.
months. So,
Yeah.
and then first of all, it takes a normal person 3 months to get acclimated in a full-time job. So, with a person with autism, with them working shorter periods of time or task-oriented, it takes time. How long did it take you to get acclimated to working full-time at First Mass Mutual and when you first started there?
It started out like rather bumpy, but then it took me about 2 months, maybe a little bit more, to then get fully acclimated. And then a lot of that reason was because my manager and several of the other people surrounding me had never worked with someone on the spectrum before, and they did not get any of the training or any of the needed resources. So I feel like if employers can get a lot of that training and resources beforehand, we can shorten that time frame to weeks, and sometimes maybe even a little shorter than that.
Frank, what your experience with JJ and
then just
how, kind of getting him acclimated and, because it wasn't like he just jumped right in.
No, and it is I call it building blocks. You get him comfortable doing one task, and once he's mastered that, and it's very visual. I can't emphasize that more. So, but just showing him how to tape a box. That's all I had him doing. Like the first couple days was just taping a box. Just tape the box. And he mastered that. And then we got him to not putting stuff in the box. And there's a skill set with that, because you don't know if the item's fragile or not. And there's, but we explain that to him, and we write notes on the label, on the back of the label for him. And so he knows, and he knows that, you know, if there's a hold, meaning we have to explain something, he knows to stop and wait, you know. You know, and then moving from that, we went into our printing area where he, again, this was one of my enlightening moments, but everybody here knows what these postcards they call, post office calls them EDDMs, everyday door direct mailers. Okay, those are those giant marketing cards you get in the mail. A lot of businesses use that, very cost effective. We do that work, but the post office needs to see that come in a certain way, in bundles. And I could tell you that JJ, you know, when I was trying to explain that this was a task that I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to explain this to him because, you know, these are all broken up in routes. And I said, JJ, this is going to one route and we need 1006. I'm pulling out my calculator to tell him how many bundles. And he says, well, that's 20 bundles and 6 singles. You know, and I looked at him like, what? You know, and I did the math and I looked at him again and I was like, you know, you're right. You know, I was dying inside. You know? But, you know, and again, that's one of those enlightening moments, but it's a mundane task, okay, to do that, especially when you're doing a lot of it, but it's in his comfort zone. And so, you know, he knows exactly what he needs to do with that. And again, it improves productivity because I don't have the front end people doing that, which they would normally have done in the past.
And
Can I have Lara chime in real quick? Is that okay? Or do you want to
Okay,
go
go ahead.
first? Lara, when you're communicating, you know, or talking to potential employers, you know, and we're talking about this isn't a quick fix, you know, how do you approach them and, you know, kind of educate them?
My approach is one that really shows employers that this will benefit their workplace and culture as a whole. So like what Greg and you were talking about, Becky, if it has a process, write it down. That's going to benefit, yes, your employee with autism, but that is going to benefit a whole bunch of other people, and kind of build out employees, general employee support. So talking about that a little bit with employers, also defining goals and having employers send me or the job liaison the comprehensive job description so we can really break those jobs out and we can start from square one. We can work with the employee and say, hey, these are the priority tasks. Can we focus on these for the next 2 to 3 months and then build on that and build on that and build on that. I think Greg said structure, you know, providing that structure, and also what Greg said, to reiterate, is to review, you know, every couple of months rather than waiting a year for an evaluation. And some of that will be a part of our professional cohort as well. And I don't know that this is necessarily part of that question, or if we ask, I do see that transportation is on here, but I think it's really important to let employers know about all of the barriers and the really systemic barriers to employment that face the disability community. Not necessarily because we expect the employer to fix it, but that we're working, like you said, baby steps, and that we're working on addressing each of those issues, because it affects the whole picture.
Gotcha. So do you need a break, Greg?
Yes, can I get a couple minutes?
We're going to take a 5-minute break and we'll come back.